Edgar Cayce predicted something that has only just begun to make sense in 2026, and it is not a coincidence or a free interpretation. It is such a precise description of what is happening in the world today that when you read it, it will send chills down your spine. Cayce died in 1945, without the internet, without satellites, and without access to any of the tools we use today to understand the world. And yet, with disturbing accuracy, he described events that we are experiencing right now. He spoke of a time when East and West would stand on the brink of a conflict that would shake the foundations of the world order. He spoke of leaders who would divide nations. He spoke of changes on Earth so profound that they would force humanity either to awaken or to sink. Does that sound familiar? Today, in 2026, there is an ongoing war in the Middle East. Israel and Iran have brought tensions to a point that no one could have anticipated a decade ago. The United States, with Trump once again in power, is redefining the alliances that sustained the Western world for 80 years. And in the midst of all this, there are millions of people like you who feel that something is changing, that this is not merely politics, and that something greater is moving behind the curtain. Cayce called it the Great Awakening of Consciousness. He said it would be preceded by chaos, uncertainty, and a global feeling that the ground was shifting beneath people's feet. Are you feeling that? Because if you are, this video is not a coincidence. It is possible that something deeper brought you here, and what you are about to discover will change the way you see the world, the historic moment we are living through, and your own role within it. We are going to explore the 6 predictions of Edgar Cayce that are coming to life in 2026, one by one, with context, depth, and the question that no channel dares to ask out loud: what if everything that is happening has a purpose that goes beyond what we understand? Stay until the end, because the 6th prediction is the one that should matter most to you, not because of the fear it creates, but because of the hope it conceals. If this content interests you, give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. What comes next could be the most important thing you see today. Before discussing the predictions, you need to understand who this man was, because if you do not know where he came from, the predictions may seem like nothing more than interesting facts. They are not. They are something much deeper. The year is 1901. In a small town in Kentucky, a young photographer named Edgar Cayce loses his voice. The doctors cannot find an explanation. The paralysis of his vocal cords is complete, and no treatment works. Desperate, Cayce decides to try something that no one around him has ever witnessed before. He lies down, closes his eyes, and while in a deep trance, begins speaking clearly in detail, and with a precision that leaves everyone in the room speechless. He diagnoses his own illness, describes the exact treatment required, and when he awakens, his voice has returned. That changes everything. Over the next 43 years, Cayce conducts more than 14,000 psychic readings. They are called sleep readings because he gives them while lying down in a trance with his eyes closed. He speaks about illnesses, past lives, the Akashic records, humanity's hidden history, and the future. Doctors, scientists, politicians, and ordinary people travel from all over the world to sit before him. What they receive is not vagueness. It is specificity, detail, and information that should not have existed. He predicts the beginning and end of both the First and Second World Wars years in advance. He describes the Great Depression before it occurs, speaks of the creation of the State of Israel decades before it exists, and predicts the resurgence of China as a global power at a time when the country is considered an irrelevant sleeping giant. But there is something very few people know about Cayce. He does not consider himself special. He does not see himself as a guru or a prophet. In fact, many of his own readings disturb him. Sometimes he awakens without remembering anything he has said and has to read his own transcripts as though they were the words of a stranger. "It is not I who speak," he says. "I am only a channel." And this is where the subject becomes truly fascinating, because Cayce believes that access to this information is not a gift exclusive to him. He believes that all human beings possess the ability to connect with something greater, with what he calls the universal mind, a field of collective consciousness in which everything that has happened and everything that could happen is recorded, the Akashic Records. Today, in 2026, that concept no longer sounds so strange. Quantum physics has begun to approach ideas that resonate with what Casey described almost a century ago: non-locality, quantum entanglement, and consciousness as a field rather than merely a product of the brain. It is possible that a man in 1920 gained access to a dimension of reality that science is only now beginning to recognize. The question is not whether Casey was genuine. Thousands of his documented predictions are archived at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, or ARE, in Virginia Beach, where they are open to the public and can be verified. The real question is different. Why do some of his visions of the future speak so directly to the exact moment we are living through? It is because Casey did not speak only about events, he spoke about cycles. He spoke about humanity as an organism that moves through phases of darkness and awakening. He also spoke about a specific period at the beginning of the 21st century as the pivotal moment, the turning point, the moment when humanity would make a choice. According to him, that choice would not be made by a leader, a government, or any institution. It would be made by each of us individually, within the silent intimacy of our own consciousness. Now, with that context in mind, let us discuss the first prediction, because what Edgar Cayce saw concerning the world order is unfolding before our eyes. Cayce stated it clearly in one of his most frequently quoted readings: "A time will come when the great powers of the West will lose the trust of the nations they once guided, and within that vacuum, new forces will arise that will reshape the map of human power." He said this in 1939. Today, in 2026, you do not need to be a clairvoyant to see what is happening, but you do need to pause for a moment and view it in its entirety, because when you do, the magnitude of what is changing becomes almost impossible to process. Donald Trump has returned to the presidency of the United States, and with him has returned a vision of the world that is radically different from the one that sustained the international order since 1945, an order built upon alliances, multilateral institutions, and the idea that the West shared a civilizing mission. Trump does not believe in that, and he has said so. NATO is under pressure unlike anything it has faced before. Transatlantic relations are fractured. For the first time in decades, Europe is seriously discussing its own defense, and countries that once looked toward Washington as the center of the global order are beginning to make their own calculations. China watches, Russia acts, and the global South negotiates. Casey did not use the names of these countries as we know them today, but he spoke of a reconfiguration of the powers of the North and South, East and West, accompanied by a global feeling of disorientation and a loss of the reference points that had given stability to the modern world. You are feeling that disorientation, and you are not alone. Casey said that this feeling has a purpose. According to his readings, the collapse of old orders is not a tragedy. It is a contraction before birth. It is the pain that comes before something new, something we cannot yet see clearly but that is already forming at the edges of the visible world. This is where the prediction becomes spiritually powerful. Casey said that whenever human power becomes too concentrated in the hands of a few, the universe activates mechanisms of correction, not as punishment, but as balance, as though humanity's collective consciousness possessed its own immune system. That immune system is activated through individual awakening, through people who stop completely surrendering their understanding of the world to institutions, the media and leaders, through people who begin asking their own questions, seeking deeper truths, and connecting the points concealed by the noise of daily life. If you are watching this video, you may already be part of that process. The new balance of power that Casey envisioned was not only geopolitical, it was also internal. It was a redistribution of spiritual authority from the outside to the inside, from institutions to individual consciousness. That connects directly to the second prediction, because Casey did not only foresee the collapse of the political order, he also saw what would come to fill the void. What he saw in the region of the world that now holds everyone's heart in suspense, the Middle East, is perhaps his most terrifying and at the same time, most luminous vision. Pay close attention to what comes next, because it will change the way you see the conflict occurring out there. If there is one region of the planet where Casey's predictions resonate with breathtaking precision, it is the Middle East. Casey spoke repeatedly about that land. He called it the cradle of human consciousness, not only because of its religious history, but because he believed that the keys to humanity's origins, Atlantis, pre-flood civilizations, and records that would transform everything we believe we know about who we are were buried there, both literally and metaphorically. But he also spoke of fire. He spoke of a conflict in that region that would become so intense and so difficult to contain that it would involve powers from around the world. It would not merely be a conflict over territory. At its deepest level, it would be about identity, about who has the right to exist, to believe, and to claim what is sacred. Today, Israel and Iran have reached a level of tension that few analysts know how to define. It is not a Cold War, and it is not peace. It is something for which no known category exists. It is a chessboard on which every move could trigger something irreversible. Behind that chessboard stands the United States, with Trump making decisions that are redrawing the map of alliances throughout the region. Casey said something that I need you to hear carefully. He said that the world's most visible conflicts are not the central problem, they are the symptom. They are the external manifestation of an internal war that humanity has failed to resolve for centuries. The war between fear and love, between an identity that divides and a consciousness that unites. He said that this internal war is the only one that truly matters, because no lasting peace agreement in human history has ever emerged from fear or force. The agreements that endure, the ones that truly transform, arise from a change in consciousness, from a moment when opposing sides stop viewing each other as enemies and begin seeing themselves as parts of the same organism that is destroying itself. Perhaps that sounds utopian, but Casey was not naive. He was profoundly realistic about human darkness, and yet he continued to insist that darkness always precedes the dawn. There is something here that many channels do not dare to say openly. The conflict in the Middle East is producing an unexpected side effect. It is awakening an urgent spiritual search in millions of people, a need to understand, to pray, and to find something that gives meaning to what appears meaningless. Searches related to spirituality, purpose, and the meaning of life are reaching historically high levels around the world. Casey would call this a positive sign, because he said that when human beings run out of answers on the horizontal plane, in politics, economics, and the media, they naturally raise their eyes toward the vertical plane, toward the transcendent. That movement, that turning inward and upward, is exactly what he said would be necessary for a collective awakening to become possible. You watching this video right now are part of that statistic. You are part of that silent movement of millions of souls searching for something deeper than today's news, and that is not a coincidence. Casey would say that there is intelligence within it, that world events are calibrated to produce precisely the level of pressure required for humanity to awaken, like coal transforming into a diamond under extreme pressure. Speaking of transformation under pressure, the third prediction takes us into an area that Casey explored with unique depth, the body of the Earth itself, because he saw physical changes occurring on the planet, and some of them are already happening. Casey was one of the first people to speak about what we now call climate change, but he did so from a perspective that no scientist has officially adopted, although some privately consider it. He said that changes in the Earth are not independent from changes in human consciousness, that the planet is a living being that responds, and that when humanity continuously operates from fear, greed, and violence, that energy has physical consequences for the planet's climatic, geological, and electromagnetic systems. He did not present this as a metaphor. He presented it as fact. Today, in 2026, the data is impossible to ignore. Extreme climate events have reached a frequency without precedent in modern recorded history. Geological anomalies are increasing in regions that had experienced no significant activity for centuries. Oceanic patterns are changing in ways that scientific models did not anticipate would happen so quickly. Science has its explanations. They are valid, and they are necessary. But Casey added another layer that science still does not know how to measure: the spiritual dimension of the environmental crisis. Prediction 3. The poles and geophysical change. Casey spoke of a shift in the Earth's axis. He spoke of changes in the poles that would radically alter climate patterns. He spoke of lands that would be flooded and other lands that would emerge. Is it happening exactly as he described? Not with that level of drama, at least not yet. However, the drift of the North Magnetic Pole, which has accelerated significantly in recent decades, is a documented fact. Although scientists have their own explanations, there is something disturbing about the coincidence. What Casey added as spiritual context is the most valuable part. He said these physical changes had an evolutionary purpose, that the Earth, like every living organism, passes through cycles of renewal, and that those cycles, although painful during the transition, are necessary for the evolutionary leap of the species. Not catastrophe, but transformation. Prediction 4. Collective consciousness as a climatic force. This is perhaps his most radical and also his most hopeful prediction. Casey said that if enough human beings reached an elevated level of consciousness, love, understanding, and genuine spiritual connection, it would have a measurable effect on the Earth's physical systems. Today, researchers at the HeartMath Institute in California have spent decades studying precisely this subject: how collective human emotional states generate electromagnetic fields that affect the environment. Their studies are real, published, and verifiable. They are not Casey's work, but they approach the same idea: that consciousness is not encapsulated within the individual skull, but expands, interacts with, and influences the collective and physical field of the world. This brings us to something that completely changes the question. The question is not only, what is happening to the world? The question is, what is happening to my consciousness while all of this occurs? Because if Casey was right, every person who chooses love over fear, understanding over judgment, and connection over isolation is not merely improving their personal life, they are contributing to a collective field that produces real consequences within our shared reality. That makes you more than a spectator of world events. It makes you an active participant in the collective destiny of humanity. Feel both the weight and the beauty of that, because it is exhausting to live as a spectator, watching the news and feeling that nothing depends on you. It is completely different to live knowing that your internal state has a function within the greater tapestry. Casey believed this with every fiber of his being. Predictions 5 and 6 speak most directly about you, your role, and what is available to the souls who choose to awaken at this specific moment in history. What comes next is what should interest you most. There is something Casey repeated throughout his readings with a consistency that is impossible to ignore. He said that humanity is recovering abilities it once possessed and then lost. He was not speaking about science fiction superpowers. He was speaking about something far subtler and, at the same time, far more powerful. He spoke of the ability to perceive beyond the five senses, to heal through conscious intention, to communicate on levels that transcend verbal language, and to know, without anyone explaining it to you, what the soul has already known since before this birth. He spoke of heightened intuition and clairvoyance, not as anomalies, but as natural conditions of an awakened human being. He said that this return would not occur suddenly. It would happen gradually as humanity passed through crises that forced it to search for internal resources it had forgotten. Today, in 2026, something is happening that confirms this prediction in a silent but massive way. Interest in meditation, spiritual practices, contemplative neuroscience, and experiences of expanded consciousness has reached historically unprecedented levels. This is not happening only in niche communities. It is happening in hospitals, universities, Fortune 500 companies, and research laboratories belonging to some of the world's most rigorous institutions. The science of consciousness is ceasing to be marginal. Researchers at Stanford, Harvard, and MIT are seriously studying phenomena that would have been automatically dismissed 20 years ago: near-death experiences, non-local cognition, the effects of collective prayer on physical systems, cellular memory, and cardiac coherence as a measurable and replicable state. Casey would have smiled, because he did not seek scientific validation, but he did believe that science and spirituality would eventually arrive at the same destination from opposite directions, that quantum physics and the Akashic records were different descriptions of the same reality. At that point of convergence, something extraordinary becomes possible: the democratization of awakening. In the past, access to certain elevated states of consciousness required decades of monastic practice, complete renunciation of the material world, and training within closed traditions. Casey said that this model was coming to an end and that in the new age, awakening would become available to ordinary people, to mothers, workers, and young people who would never set foot inside a monastery. Do you know what is most extraordinary about that? The technology we now reject as a spiritual distraction, apps, digital content, and global connectivity, can also become a vehicle for awakening when it is used with that intention. The fact that you are watching this right now, searching for content that nourishes something deeper than superficial entertainment, is evidence that this prediction is being fulfilled. Casey spoke of missionary souls, souls who would reincarnate during this specific period of history with a special purpose. They would not be saviors or superior enlightened beings, but bridges, people who, through their own process of searching and growth, create space for others to awaken as well. What if you are one of those souls? I am not saying this to make you feel special in an egotistical sense. I am saying it because Casey insisted that most of these missionary souls would not consciously know who they were. They would simply feel an inexplicable attraction toward truth, a discomfort with superficiality, and a thirst that the material world could never completely satisfy. Does that sound familiar? Then stay with me, because the sixth prediction is what everything before has been preparing us for. It speaks directly about the period in which we are living and is, according to many scholars of Casey, the most important prediction of all. We have reached the prediction that Edgar Cayce considered the center of his entire body of work, the one that gave meaning to everything else: the geopolitical chaos, the climatic changes, the conflicts that seem to have no solution, and the collective feeling that something is ending while something new is struggling to be born. Casey spoke about the age of Aquarius, not in vague astrological terms, but with specificity. He said that the transition into this age would bring a profound reconfiguration of the way humanity understands power, health, education, spirituality, and relationships between human beings. He said that the age of Pisces, the previous 2,000 years, had been dominated by blind faith, vertical authority, and a relationship between humanity and the divine mediated by institutions, churches, states, and systems that said, "We know, and you obey." The age of Aquarius, Casey said, would be the time of direct knowledge, personal connection with the divine without intermediaries, and individual awakening as a collective act. He placed this transition between the end of the 20th century and the first decades of the 21st century. Exactly now. Look at it from above for a moment. Religious institutions are experiencing a historic crisis of credibility. Political systems are being questioned from within and without. Traditional media outlets have lost the trust of the masses. Conventional medicine is being supplemented in millions of homes by practices that were considered marginal 20 years ago. Everything that once served as a central authority is being decentralized. Is it chaos? Yes. Is it also exactly what Casey predicted? Yes. But there is one part of this prediction that is almost never mentioned, and it is the most important. Casey said that the transition would not happen automatically. It would depend upon a critical mass of human beings consciously choosing to evolve. Collective awakening was not an event that would simply happen to humanity. It was a choice humanity would have to make, person by person, soul by soul. He said the most critical period for that choice would occur around 2025 and 2026, not because the world would end, but because it would be the moment of greatest tension between the two available paths: the path of fear, control, and fragmentation, or the path of consciousness, cooperation, and love. Trump and nationalist movements around the world represent a real force seeking security through closure, tribal identity, and stronger borders. That is humanly understandable. Fear seeks control. But at the same time, and also in 2026, there is a movement of consciousness with no visible leader, no central headquarters, and no place on the 8 o'clock news. It consists of millions of people in every country and every culture who are choosing something different. They are choosing to ask more questions, judge less, connect more deeply, and seek truths that transcend national, religious, and ideological boundaries. Casey would say that these two forces, closure and openness, fear and love, are reaching their greatest point of tension precisely now, and that the outcome of this tension has not been written. It is being written by every one of us at this very moment, not necessarily at the ballot box, not necessarily in the streets, but through the daily decisions we make about how we relate to fear, to other people, and to ourselves, and whether we choose to remain asleep or begin awakening today. This brings us to the conclusion, because Casey left a final message for this time, a message I want you to carry with you after you finish watching this video. Do not forget it. Edgar Cayce died on January 3, 1945. He was exhausted, completely exhausted. He had given more readings than his body could endure because the Second World War had brought despair to millions of families who came to him searching for answers about their sons on the front lines, about the future, and about whether the world would survive what it was experiencing. It did survive. It always survives. His final documented words before his death concerned the future. He did not speak with fear or offer dark warnings. With a calmness that bewildered those around him, and with a hope that seemed incompatible with the condition of the world at that time, he said that a time would come when humanity, after passing through its darkest trials, would choose to remember who it truly is. Not who it had been told it was, not the identity assigned to it by institutions, governments, religions, or collective fear, but who it really is. Beings of consciousness, extensions of the divine in temporary form, souls on a journey that reaches far beyond this life, this body, this year, this conflict, and this screen. He said that this time of remembrance was now. I need you to listen to what comes next with all the attention you can give me, because here lies the heart of everything we have explored together today. Casey's predictions are not meant to frighten you. They are not material for anxiety. They are not fuel for the catastrophism that is already far too present in every feed, every headline, and every conversation about politics, climate, or war. They are exactly the opposite. They are a map that says, what is happening makes sense within an arc greater than the one you can see from day to day. The chaos you observe outside is not evidence that everything is lost, but evidence that something old is dying so that something new can be born, and you here and now, in this specific and apparently ordinary moment of your life, have an active role in that process. You do not have to be famous to fulfill that role. You do not have to lead a movement, gain 1 million followers, or resolve the conflicts of the Middle East from your living room. You only have to awaken to the extent that you can, with the honesty available to you today. Awakening is not a mystical experience reserved for monks living on remote mountains. Awakening means asking yourself questions you once avoided. It means examining the fears that control you without your awareness. It means treating others, even those whose beliefs are radically different from yours, with the same compassion that deep down you know you deserve to receive. It means connecting, even for only one moment each day, with something greater than the everyday noise of the ego. Call it God, the universe, cosmic consciousness, divine intelligence, or simply the sacred. The name matters far less than the connection. Casey said something that I find tremendously powerful and tremendously human at the same time. He said that the spiritual path does not begin when you have solved all your problems. It does not begin when you have more time, more money, more stability, or more peace. It begins at the exact moment when, in the midst of chaos, you decide that something deeper is guiding you, that an intelligence exists within your life that transcends what you can see with your physical eyes. That decision, that inward turning, is awakening. It is not a decision you make only once. It is a decision you make every day, sometimes several times a day, whenever fear pulls you in one direction and something wiser within you invites you to breathe, broaden your perspective, and remember that you are more than your circumstances. We are living through the strangest, fastest, most challenging, and paradoxically most fertile period in recent human history. Trump is redefining Western power. Israel and Iran remain in a balance that leaves the world holding its breath to see what will happen. The climate is sending signals that we can no longer ignore. The institutions that once provided certainty are beginning to crack. In the midst of all this, hundreds of millions of people like you, are searching for something beyond the latest political analysis. They are searching for meaning, purpose, connection, and truth. Never before in history have so many people simultaneously had access to so much spiritual knowledge. Never before has the search for meaning been so widespread, so democratic, and so urgent. Never before has awakening been available to so many people, regardless of country, religion, language, or personal history. Casey saw it. He called it the great opportunity of the collective soul, and he said that the souls who chose to awaken during this period would not do so only for themselves. They would do so as a service, as a silent but genuine contribution to the collective field of consciousness that sustains the world. Every person who chooses love over fear is tipping the balance, even if no one sees it, even if it is never reported by the media, even if it happens in the privacy of their own heart at 3 o'clock in the morning. The balance is still being tipped. So I leave you with one question, not for you to answer me, but for you to answer silently within yourself when you finish watching this video and the screen goes dark. What are you choosing today? More fear or more consciousness? More closure or more openness? Will you continue viewing the world as something that simply happens to you, or will you begin inhabiting it as someone who has a purpose within it? That answer, multiplied by millions of souls across this planet, is what will determine which of the futures Casey envisioned ultimately materializes. That future has not yet been written. It is being written now, at this very moment, by you, by me, and by every soul that decides today that it wants to be part of the solution rather than part of the noise. Casey trusted that we would reach this point. Now the question is whether we trust ourselves. If this video touched something real within you, share it with someone else who is also searching. Awakening has always been a collective matter. See you in the next video.